So understand that this lecture is purely from an academic standpoint. This does not define what I as a Christian believe, what I as a priest believe, what my church believes. This is not doctrinally definitive. This is purely academic. So I encourage you to keep that in mind as we begin the lecture. I'm going to give everybody a few more minutes to pop in. Go ahead and share the live if you know somebody who you think would be interested in learning about this kind of stuff. Absolutely, share the live with people. I'm not really one of those people who know a whole lot about TikTok, so if I act confused because I don't know what something is, it's probably because I don't know what just happened. Like the little thing that just made a sound. I have no idea what that means, but anyways, so welcome. I'm Father Mark. I am an Anglican Catholic priest. I was ordained as a priest in about a year ago. So, Tommy, give me 30 minutes. 30 minutes, and we'll do a little Q&A, and then we'll go back to the lecture. Okay, we'll give ourselves a little break, get water, go to the bathroom, whatever you need to do. All right. Another little warning here. This topic, what we do in a seminary classroom is we use critical thinking. So put on your critical thinking caps. Go ahead and take those out and put those on for me. If you don't know how to critically think, then hopefully you will understand critical thinking at least a little bit by the end of this lecture here. Okay. Critical thinking is important, guys, especially when approaching biblical text. All right. It looks like we've got 6 people in here. That's a good start. No problem. I'm going to share it with a couple of more people. I don't know who all I've shared it with. I really don't remember. So let's go ahead and get a few more folks in here. See if we can get a few more folks in here. I'd also like to just give this one little base rule. There are people in here who are not Christian. So I am watching the comments. My moderators are watching the comments. Do not be rude to somebody else just because they're not Christian. This is for the general population learning experience. So this is not meant to destroy your faith if you are Christian. This is just meant to cause you to step back and think a little bit. Okay? Hopefully this is very interesting to you. I know for me it's extremely interesting. Again, after about 30-ish minutes, so around 9 o'clock EST, we'll give ourselves a little break and I'll let people come up. It's not going to be a bunch of people, just a couple of people. I'll let them come up and ask questions and we'll pick each other's brains. Okay. All right. So this is our second lecture in this series on Johannine literature. The last time we gave a lecture, we explored the Gospel of John with its distinct Christology and theological themes. And for this lecture, part 2 of that series, we're going to turn our attention to the Johannine Epistles. Those Johannine Epistles are 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John. And these documents within the text we can see that they reflect a later stage within the Johannine community's development. So when we look at the New Testament within the Christian context of Scripture, we have two different portions of literature. We have Pauline literature and Johannine literature. Johannine literature, just for a little historical background, scholars are not entirely sure that it was all written by the same author. Of course, it's all attributed to St. John. However, scholars have there is some debate on that matter. Any questions so far? There are plenty of people here in the comments who are very much qualified to answer questions. So guys, those of you who are in here who are scholars, if you see a question and I don't see it, you're more than welcome to answer. I'm not going to be offended. All right, so we're going to begin with the historical and social background for these epistles. We understand as scholars that these epistles were likely written somewhere in the late first century, around 85 to 95 AD. And John was writing these, or the author was writing to these communities that were facing this internal division. So unlike the Pauline letters, and I'm sure at some point we'll be doing a lecture series on those. So unlike the Pauline letters, which address doctrinal disputes with external groups like the Jews or Gentile converts, the Johannine epistles reflect this internal schism that's happening, and that's most likely between the traditional Johannine Christology and some other people within that category, within that community, that are adopting a more Gnostic or proto-Gnostic interpretation of Jesus. So we see these differences, and these differences are important when we're looking at these texts because just a little background about myself. I grew up evangelical, so I grew up very fundamentalist, very strict fundamentalist, and there was no room for interpretation of the text. It was whatever the pastor or preacher said when he stood up that Sunday and gave his homily. So when it comes to Christian scholars, we have to understand that just because we understand something academically does not mean that that carries over into our theology. Okay. So just a little interesting tidbit about Christianity. We have the ability to step out of theology and look at this text from an academic standpoint. We have tons and tons and tons of authors who have written about the history of these Johannine texts. We have lots and lots of scholars that have really dove into these texts and pulled them apart. And I know I was in a live the other day and I got accused of attacking the Bible. How ironic, you know, suddenly you use your brain and now you're a heretic, I guess. But when we begin to dissect these texts, we have that separation between academia and theology. Our theology doesn't always reflect the academia, and the academia doesn't always reflect the theology. But the point of these lectures is because I have run into so many purely uneducated Christians, and it's not that they're not reading their scriptures, it's not that they're not studying things like the early church fathers or some of these earlier theologians, it's that they are not given the appropriate tools to work with such an in-depth text. Biblical study can get very complicated in a lot of ways. Yes, Catholicus Augustinianus. Yes, I do remember you. Unfortunately, buddy, I'm not taking any guest up in the box right now. I will here in a few minutes. So if you're taking notes, just a little backtrack. I got a little sidetracked. We just discussed the historical and social context of the Johannine Epistles. This is technically section 2 of the lecture here. We're going to get into the Johannine community and its crisis now. So if you're taking notes, you can just put a little subheading, the Johannine community and its crisis. So we know that from an academic standpoint that the Johannine community was at one point fully united under the theological framework of the Gospel of John. So we see, and this is very interesting because the Johannine section of literature is probably one of the very few portions within the New Testament that actually builds off of each other or contains the same moral theme and ending idea. So we see that at one point the Johannine community was united under that theological framework, but we see this smaller fraction begin to reinterpret Johannine Christology, and that leads us into possibly denying the full humanity of Christ, which we know as the heresy of Docetism. So we see that separation in thought where they start reinterpreting things and straying away from that original idea of the Gospel of John. So First John suggests that certain members had broken away from the community. We see this specifically in First John chapter 2, verse 19. It says, they went out from us, but they were not of us. So we see that we're seeing that idea that they came from us. No, Catholicus. It's just easier for people to see me as a priest. When people see me as an archbishop, they get a little nervous and then they don't want to talk to me anymore. So I just stuck myself in there as Father Mark. I'm still an archbishop. I just am not using that as my social media presence. So we see that distinct break within the Johannine community. And what do I mean when I say Johannine community? We have what we call as scholars the Johannine school of thought. And under that umbrella falls Johannine literature, and then we have the Johannine Gospels, we have the Johannine Epistles, and then we have the Book of the Apocalypse, also known as the Book of Revelation. So we see that stray starting to happen where they're starting to reinterpret their own theology. And we see this constantly throughout the history of the church. We see this, of course, in all of the church councils. We see this in the debates between early church fathers. We see this in the debates between theologians. We see this in the splits between Christian denominations. The reason that we have so many Christian denominations in the modern world is simply because we start reinterpreting theology that we once used to all hold together on. So again, we see that certain members are starting to break away from the community because of their change in interpretation, their change in understanding of their relationship with the divine. So we start looking at the rise of these opposing Christologies. And I don't know if I'm going to be doing lectures on Christology and Mariology and sacramentology yet, but we'll decide that later. But we see this rise of opposing Christologies, which is the understanding of who Christ is as a person, as a divine being, and those two as a whole. So that understanding of Christ's human and divine nature. The Gospel of John already emphasizes Jesus' divinity. However, we start seeing that some within the community are starting to move towards this more extreme view, which shows that they've started denying the fleshly incarnate Christ. And this is an early form of Gnostic thought. So I don't know if any of you have been around for very long on TikTok, on Christian TikTok, on religious TikTok in general. But Gnosticism, Christian Gnosticism, is starting to become increasingly more popular. So, so if you see someone say, "Oh, I'm a Gnostic Christian," this is where this Christology and ideology comes from. It comes from this split and debate over Christ's divinity. 1 John chapter 4, verses 2 through 3 says, "Every spirit that confesses that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is from God, and every spirit that does not confess Jesus is not from God." So we see that John, or the community, the Johannine community, addresses this issue, saying, we understand that obviously, we see this change in belief, we see this difference and this schism, internal schism within the Johannine community. So they address that, saying, those who confess Jesus Christ is God in the flesh, is from God, and then every spirit that does not confess Jesus is not from God. So we see that they address this issue with this rise of opposing Christologies. All right. A few more minutes and then we'll take a little Q&A break, get some water, use the bathroom if you have to. I don't want to make this 3 hours, but only God knows what's going to happen in the next few hours. So now that we've got that basis of Johannine literature and we started to kind of form that historical and social context understanding of the text, we're going to start to get into textual analysis. Now, textual analysis is scary for a lot of people, especially Christians. I've noticed that as a professor, as somebody who teaches these things, a lot of people start to really worry when we start to get into, when we start to get into that textual analysis and thematic overview, because unfortunately, lots of Christians truly believe that in order to be a, quote, good Christian, we can only take things from a fundamental face value. So they never stop to think about the academic side of things. Like I said the other night, I got accused of attacking the Bible, which as a priest, as a bishop, I would never do something like that. I think the Christian faith is beautiful. Obviously, that's why I'm a Christian. Not the only reason, but that's one of the reasons I'm a Christian. So for those of you who are Christian in the comments, please understand that this is not an attack on the faith, that this is not an attack on Scripture. But the problem is that when we see other Christians go live, and I run into this issue often, and so does Dr. Hannah, who is a rabbi. I think she's in here somewhere. um, who I absolutely adore. She's an amazing person. Something that she can even tell you is that Christians, modern Christians, especially if they're younger, typically aren't heavily educated. They're educated very basically, and that's because they go to other Christians' lives and try to learn from, again, people who don't have an education. So the goal for these lectures is not to upset you, is not to offend you. It's to simply say, hey, we are allowed to look at the academic side of this text, and there is an academic side. And once you get comfortable with that idea that we can pull something apart academically and really dive into it, your study of those scriptures will become much more um, invigorating. It'll become much more interesting because now you truly understand the historical context. You truly understand the social context. You truly understand the point of the text. And unfortunately, I've met a lot of Christians, um, not just on TikTok, but on any other social media platform in public, who simply just don't have the education. So they get offended when you start to use your brain. And I always tell people God gave us brains for a reason, and we're supposed to be using them. Um, Unfortunately, Christians have forgot the idea of questioning God, questioning our faith. If we don't ask questions, guys, then we're never going to get anywhere else. We have to ask questions. We have to look at things. We have to use critical thinking when we study this text. Education is important. You know, um, give me just a second. My throat is awfully dry. I'll take a sip of water. Education is important simply because if we don't have this education, then we truly don't understand what the text is conveying. So we're going to start to examine these texts. First, second, and third John. Get your pencils ready. I've got about 5 minutes, so we're not even going to be able to finish this entire portion of the lecture. I calculated it's supposed to take me 40 minutes, so that's going to be broken up a little bit. All right, we're going to talk about First John. All right, everybody taking notes? If you're not, it's okay. Just a little preface. If you want notes, I have them for this lecture. I put together a set of notes, so if you just want to listen, that's fine, and you want to get the notes later, that's okay. So we're going to look at the theological polemic and pastoral concern that First John expresses. This is not structured like the typical epistle that we see elsewhere in the text. This is more of a sermon, homily, whatever you want to call it, or a theological treatise. So we already start to see lots of differences between the Johannine community writings, and the rest of the New Testament text. So what are some of the key themes that we find in First John? First and foremost, the one that stuck out to me the most, and the one that is mentioned in my professor's edition textbook, is love and ethical behavior. So we see the Johannine community promoting this kind of love and portraying it as this mark of true discipleship. We also see a lot of Christology, and we also see theology about the incarnation. And we see this counter um, portion that they're countering the denial of Jesus' fleshly existence. We see this in 1 John chapter 1, verse 1 through 3. So we see this counter effect where they're trying to combat this idea of proto-Gnosticism or Gnostic thought. And then, of course, the third point that we see is sin and atonement. So this epistle addresses Jesus as the atoning sacrifice for Christianity. Um, so those are the key themes within that portion of the text. And then, of course, we also see First John primarily as a corrective response to what the early Christians understood to be false teaching, and they were reinforcing that core Johannine theology. All right, so we're going to stop there for just a minute. We're gonna take like a 5-10 minute break. So I will see you guys back at 8:09. Probably I'll see you guys back at 8:10. I'm still gonna be here, but if you need to get up and uh, stretch your legs, I know a lot of people don't have long attention spans anymore. So if you want to get up and stretch and grab a drink, grab a sip of water, use the restroom real quick. We're gonna start back um, and dive into Second John, and then we'll get into some really, really interesting stuff. Well, Rabbi, if you threw your back out, I would recommend that you stay in bed. Um, do you at least have a water bottle with you? Oh, I've got a guest requesting it. Okay, we'll do that. Just a brief. Yeah, absolutely. I'll send you guys both notes. Just a brief point out here. Um, I'm gonna pull up a couple of people, if depending on how much time I have left. I know I said 8:10, so I got about 8 minutes or 10-ish minutes. Um, understand that this is not a debate space. If you have questions about the topic, that's perfectly fine. I will do my best to answer them. But understand that we're not debating anything here, guys. This is not a Christian debate. This is simply Christian academics and what Christian academics looks like in a seminary setting. So, um, uh, Catholicus, I'm going to bring up here in just a second. Let's try to limit questioning to 1 or 2 questions, just so we give everybody a little bit of time at least, and then we'll go ahead and continue on. So I will. I don't know why I said 8:10 the last time. 9:10. 9:10. Um, my timing is off. That's okay. All right, let's bring somebody up. Perfect. Maybe if it'll load. He's still loading in. Can you guys hear me? Okay. Maybe. Okay, good. So everybody can hear me. It's just taking him a minute to load in. While he's loading, out, talk over each other. Ask your question. I'll give an answer. Yeah. Catholicus, if you want to request up again, please. I don't know what's happening. I'm not that great with TikTok. No? Okay. That's all right. I promise you guys don't have to be scared. I don't bite people, not typically. And in reference to Nick's comment, we will have a longer portion at the very end of the lecture where we can all just kind of hang out and chit chat. Well, coming up in the guest box, that's fine. You can put your questions in the comments. That's more than acceptable. If I miss it, send it again, but don't spam the chat. You can send it again just to make sure that I notice it. And I apologize if I uh, don't see it the first time. And hey, Liz Ray, good to see you. Thanks for popping by. And I know Dagda's in here. I know Rabbi Hana's in here. I know Nick's in here. I really wasn't expecting even that, honestly. This stuff can be kind of boring. But I was hoping that it would pique some interest that way maybe if I decide to do some other lectures. Hey, we got a guest.
Wi-Fi and then turn it back on again. A bunch of us, you're freezing on our end. I thought it was my internet until other people were like, no, it's me too. So I don't know if you want to just do a quick on and off on your Wi-Fi there.
You know what? It may just be where I'm sitting. Sometimes the Wi-Fi in my house.
Oh yeah, Rabbi Two's getting it too.
Yeah. I try to check in to make sure everybody can hear me. What I'll do is I'll just move to the other room.
Okay. All right, that was
That'll
all.
work. Is that a little better?
You're fine when I'm up here, but not when I'm down there, so I'm not sure they'll have to. I just want to make sure everybody.
Is this better?
Is that better, Degda, Liz, Rabbi? So far, much better, Degda says. Yeah, they're saying yeah. Awesome. Okay, I'll jump back.
Yeah, you're good. It's not any better. Hang on, maybe. Is that better? Can everyone hear me? I just turned off my Wi-Fi. I knew this was going to happen. I knew it. I had that feeling before I even started the lecture. I was like, we're going to have technology problems, aren't we? All right. Drop a 1 in the comments if you can hear me. Drop a 2 if it's still kind of. Um, I'll just put it in the comments. Um, let's see.
Okay, this might be really, really weird, but is he going now for you guys now that I'm in the box? This might be a really weird TikTok glitch, but it just hit me. It started doing it again when I left.
It's not any better. All right, guys. I'm just gonna restart the live. Um, hopefully that'll work.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, Rabbi says it's still freezing.
Okay. I'm gonna restart the live, guys. I'll be right back, and I'll just send an invite.